we don't think our way into new ways of living, we live our way into new ways of thinking. So I think especially when it comes to thinking about meaningful life, we sort of think like, I've got to do some big grand change. And actually there's an enormous amount of sort of agency and confidence and opportunity that comes when we just take a first step and try something. So the power of starting with action and noticing how you then feel and then what thoughts that triggers, rather than waiting for motivation, I think is the key. Don't wait for motivation, start by trying and the rest follows. It's understandable to feel stuck and that's okay. And just accepting how you feel is a really good starting point. So it's very common and you are not alone. And then in terms of getting unstuck, there's a huge literature around using our strengths. And I think one of the best things we can do is to just be more aware of like, what are the things that really bring out the joy in us, the best in us. And here's a painful fact about it that's almost certainly true. There will be a last time you get to do that thing. Almost always you don't know it's that last time until after it's happened.
Hello and welcome to Life's Second Act. My name is Simon Burgess and today I'm joined by Dr. Mark Williamson. Mark walked away from a very successful corporate career, 9 years at Accenture, stints at Hewlett-Packard and Orange. But after Mark's good life crisis, as he called it, he took a shift in direction. Now, Mark is co-founder and director of Action for Happiness, a movement he helped launch back in 2011 and now has over 800,000 members in more than 100 countries. The Dalai Lama was their first member and their patron still. Mark has a PhD in engineering from Bristol, and he'll be the first to tell you he's not a happiness guru. He calls himself a happiness engineer, applying the same principles he once used to design better networks to help people design better lives. He's just published his first book, Make Life Happier, a Sunday Times #1 bestseller. It offers 23 practical ways to feel better, find meaning, and make a difference. Mark is 52, married to Kate, and they have 3 children, Emily, Daisy, and Harry. Outside of work, he's a keen Aston Villa fan. He cycles a lot, and he's on a fun personal mission to cycle the equivalent distance to the moon. And he plays guitar in a band. Mark, welcome.
Thank you so much, Simon. Lovely to be here.
No, thank you, Mark, very much. I've been looking forward to this. So really, let's get straight into it. I think with your extensive experience, your research, and obviously all the work that you've done with Action for Happiness, I feel you've got a lot that you can bring to this conversation about midlife, finding purpose, maybe having a lack of direction and feeling content in ourselves in this period of life. So I'm really keen to chat to you about your chapter in your book about finding purpose, finding meaning. Before we do though, tell me a little bit about Action for Happiness. Started in 2011. Tell me who you are, what you do, for those that don't know.
Thank you for that opportunity. Well, I guess at one level, Action for Happiness is a registered charity. It's a non-profit. It's trying to make a positive difference in the world. But actually, the sort of language we've been using from the start is about building a community or even a movement of people united by a common idea that our happiness matters, but also crucially that our actions matter. So we can do things that make our own life better. We can improve our own mental well-being. We can change the direction of our life. We have this agency, is a word I love, this ability to have perhaps more control over our destiny and our day-to-day feelings and behaviors than we realize. And our action can also contribute to making life happier for others around us, actually in much more profound and deeper ways than we realize. So the energy and attitude that we bring into our relationships, our workplaces, our communities has a really profound sort of impact on others and a positive ripple. And actually, one of the greatest sources of happiness in life is to feel part of something bigger, to make a contribution. Many of your listeners, I'm sure, are very aware of that question about meaning being very much about contribution. Like, how can I help make this often very challenging and unhappy world a better place for others? So what Action for Happiness does is get people together to say, your actions matter. We really do that in 3 distinct ways. First of all, helping people learn practical skills for themselves. Like, how can I be more resilient, cope better in difficult times, feel happier? Secondly, getting them together, because relationships, connection is so vital for our well-being. So we have lots of local volunteer-led community groups and courses and ways in which people can get together and talk about these ideas, share their experiences. And then crucially, on this point about giving back, we want to give people opportunities to help others. So we have this amazing army of volunteers. And I think this is really the key to making life happy, really. Get your own house in order with the actions you can take, get together with other people, and then try and use that collective power to make the world a better place.
And have you noticed any difference from when you started, the attitudes and thoughts and beliefs of people back in 2011 to how they are now? Have you seen a shift?
Yeah, I think when I quit my, previously corporate life and then the work I was doing in environmental issues to launch, a happiness campaign, many people I loved and trusted, as well as people I didn't know, thought I was crazy. It was a bit laughable. It was a topic that seemed fluffy and irrelevant. And of course, since then, we've had a huge wake-up call around the massive importance of mental health and looking after our sort of, mental fitness as much as our physical fitness. And to some extent, COVID played a role there. I think in the pandemic, we sort of all got locked down and we realized the devastating effect of being isolated and, feeling unable to live the way we wanted to live, what it's had on our mental health. And so I think the conversation shifted. And now when you talk about happiness, people think about I want my kids to be happy at school. People think, I want my workplace to be a place where people thrive. It's gone from being a sort of embarrassing side topic to being something much more mainstream. And we've not gone nearly far enough. We're still, as a country, prioritizing economic growth to the detriment of people really flourishing in many cases, or not necessarily doing the things that really are most needed for a happier society. And at an individual level, we are stuck in habits with our devices, in polarization, in all kinds of things that are really undermining our collective happiness. So lots more work still to be done.
Interesting. I guess it was a natural progression then, the book, because with all of your knowledge, experience, the research, the people that you've spoken to, and you've spoken to so many people over the last 15 years, I suppose now, 14, 15 years, it was a natural progression, the book. How did that come about?
Well, yes. I mean, to set the scene, as you say, I've had this privilege, enormous opportunity to work with many of the leading experts in the world, from the Dalai Lama, teachers like him, to scientists, neuroscientists, economists, behavioral scientists, and so on, to try and understand what do we know about human flourishing and well-being from the scientific perspective. But perhaps more importantly, I've then helped, thousands of people try to apply those ideas in the real world, and also in my own life. And the reason I use this framing of being a happiness engineer is partly, of course, I have a background in engineering. That was what my original PhD and early work was on. But also, although there is lots of fantastic science about what makes life happier, that isn't much use to us unless we can apply it. So engineering for me is always take the science and apply it in the messy reality of the real world, with constraints and risks and people doing weird things that you wouldn't expect and so on. So I have found myself learning lots of insights about how you do engineer happiness into the messy reality of life. So along that journey, people have said to me, you should write a book, a few times. And I'd always thought, well, I'll never have time for that alongside running this sort of non-profit and mission. And yet it became increasingly clear that I felt like I had something distinctive to say and people wanted it. So I have, alongside the day job, been writing this for over 2 years in my, quotes, spare time. And it's been a real labor of love. I mean, a massive imposter syndrome. Although I've had this privilege, I certainly have found myself thinking, gosh, I'm not sure if I'm a good writer, and who am I to publish yet another happiness book? And yet it's been enormously, I guess, rewarding is the word. I don't mean financially. I don't think anyone who writes books really benefits financially. And of course, we're donating to the charity as well. But rewarding in the sense of people have really, been galvanized by the idea, and particularly in our community that have worked with these ideas for years. They've really wanted to spread this book to others. So we've had an enormous number of people taking it to their local library, buying copies for their colleagues, giving it to friends, recommending it online. And it's it's that people power, actually, that being part of something bigger. That's the reason it ended up being the Sunday Times #1, not because of anything particularly that I bring. So I guess I'm standing on the shoulders of giants, both with the ideas that I'm helping to share and also the amazing community that have helped to sort of spread this, really.
I think it was really quite touching. I think I saw the video of you going into Waterstones, I think it was, and it was there, and you sort of picked that up. I could really feel that it meant something. And you saying 2 years of labour of love to get to that point. It's a huge thing. And interesting title as well, Making Life Happier. Tell me about that title.
Yeah, well, I mean, the make the make part is about action. The life is that we're talking about the whole of our experience, and the happier as opposed to happy, I think, is a really important point about a direction of travel rather than a destination. The word happiness brings up all kinds of complexity and misunderstanding, I think. I mean, I love the concept of happiness in the way that Aristotle would have talked about it, which is like a life well lived, a full, meaningful life. And yet in modern culture, happiness is often cheapened and simplified to like, you'll be happy when you have this product, when you earn enough money, or when you eat an ice cream. We have a sort of hedonistic approach to short-term, fleeting pleasure. So I think I'm both talking about a deeper sense of life being happier. This is about not just our immediate emotions, but also our relationships and our purpose and our daily activities, and also the fact that lots of the emotional experiences we have are unhappy and they're difficult. We're angry, we're sad, we're lost, we're lonely, we're isolated. That's a real part of the human experience. So happier is like, wherever you are right now, whatever situation, whatever emotional state, whatever mental state you're in, there are things that you can do that make things that little bit better. You're heading towards feeling better overall about life. But we're not saying that everybody needs to be smiley, happy all the time, or indeed that that's even possible. So I think that's it's a really important distinction, that it's a direction of travel.
Let's talk about your journey then, because many people, and I'm one of them, and I'm still working through this myself, if I'm honest, and have been for the last few years, and still haven't quite worked this out yet. This kind of shift from your first act of who you were and what you bring into the world and your passions, and then you sort of shift a little bit. Now, I think this happened for you in a slightly different way. It wasn't necessarily age-driven, but more maybe purpose-driven. Talk to me about your personal journey, Mark, and your good life crisis that you've called it. What happened to you? How did you make that shift? What went on in your journey?
Well, it was a series of sort of wake-ups, Simon. And the first and perhaps most profound was I was busy in corporate life as a management consultant, working incredibly hard with clients that were stock exchanges and investment banks, and outwardly, quotes, successful, running big teams, pretty well paid, climbing the career ladder. And yet I was, well, I guess I hadn't realized this at the time. The immediate effect was I had really, really bad back pain. The wake up first was like, I can't even get out of bed sometimes. I'm in constant pain. This has got worse and worse over a couple of years. And I went to see experts, and I was told some pretty scary things. I had a hereditary degenerative spinal disorder that meant I would probably be in a wheelchair aged 40. I'm now 52. And as you mentioned, I cycle a lot, so I'm glad that didn't happen. And I got told some pretty scary things about damaged spine and other things. So a combination of actual pain and being told some terrifying stuff was really, really a dark place for me. And thankfully, my wife was retraining as an osteopath at the time, and she gave me a book, which I still have a copy because I was about to give it to a friend today. It's called Back Sense. Another friend has got back pain right now. And the book helped me realize that a lot of back pain is caused by muscle tension. A lot of muscle tension is caused by stress. And it said to me, do any of the following sound like you? Work really hard, tick. Really care what people think about you, old tick. Don't talk about your feelings very much, tick. And it basically had nailed me. And it sort of said, like, I was doing that classic, perhaps particularly British male thing of not really letting out the feelings, and what wasn't coming out emotionally was coming out physically in a very real way. I'd been charging really fast up a ladder of other people's expectations my whole life, whether that's school and parental expectations and career and so on. And I'd never really stopped to look at what building the ladder was leaning against. And it was like, oh my goodness, this is pretty stressful direction I'm heading in. So that was the book thankfully had some breathing exercises in it that we would now call mindfulness. This was 2001, so before mindfulness became mainstream in the UK. And the totally mind-blowing thing for me as a sort of left brain rational engineer was just a few weeks of changing my attitude to this pain, breathing sort of, instead of running away from the pain, bringing my attention to the pain, recognizing that it was stress related, making a few lifestyle changes, and just sort of letting go of some of that sort of bottled up tension. I went from not being able to get out of bed to walking a bit more normally, to being able to jog again, and then to playing tennis, and then being basically pain-free within a few months. And so my engineering brain was like, that is absolutely mind-blowing. How has that happened? How has something that seems so fluffy and so psychological, had this really profound impact on my whole being, my physical health. So that was the first of many wake-up calls. Is like, there's something really important here about mental and physical health, and about, I need to wake up and shift what I'm doing. And some other stuff flowed from there, but that hopefully sets the scene a little bit.
So I can see how that helped with your back pain, but when you think about your meaning at the time and what you were doing, how fulfilled you felt, that must have shifted as well. Tell me about that. How did that?
Well, I love that question, because in fact, that's the reason that the pain was there, I now think. So what was actually going on was I had to sort of like a void inside me. I was working really hard for something I didn't really care about. And there was a sort of ethical aspect to this, which is, as many of your listeners might know, as you get more senior in certain corporate things, you're getting asked to deliver things that are ever more deliverable. And I knew that every new client engagement I was trying to seal would lead to lots and lots of colleagues working unbelievably long hours in very stressful conditions to try and deliver something slightly undeliverable. And I didn't really feel comfortable with the ethics of that. It was like, this is not the person I want to be. And I felt a very strong disconnect between real me at home and the one that my friends knew, and me at work, that felt like it was sort of keeping up appearances and striving and so on. And I found that was taking its toll. I wasn't really a whole authentic person in the way I wanted to be. And so I think the next step after that wake-up call was like, go and find out what you really want to do with your life. I went off and did an MBA and spent a fascinating year with all these very motivated, talented people, and thinking that I would want to go into industry and perhaps go and work back in telecoms, which is a sector where I had my original training and so on. What I learned during that year, while everyone else was progressing in their career journeys, was like, this is not what I want. In fact, I was very grateful that the business school allowed us to work with a psychoanalyst for the year. So I had my first real experience of therapy and inner work, and realized all the sort of baggage I was bringing from, earlier in life and other people's expectations and so on. And the sort of discomfort I had as a people pleaser and somebody who was trying to always do what was expected of them. And during that year, I read Richard Layard's book, Happiness: Lessons from a New Science. And I was like, this feels more purposeful. Like, how do we make the world a better, happier place? So for me, that back pain wake up helped me realize a lack of meaning and go searching for it. Now, I didn't know I was going to find happiness as the meaning and purpose, but of course that was Aristotle's great quote, happiness is the meaning and purpose of life, the whole aim and end of human existence. So that's how I pivoted rather dramatically.
And I'm fascinated to understand how people sometimes have the inner confidence to make that change, when I think if I look at myself, I look at what I've done for 35 years of my life, and to a degree I worked very hard. I didn't have a great deal outside of my work, and therefore it sort of defines me. So move away from something that you were known for or are known for, I think it takes a lot of strength. Was that easy for you to do, or was it a slow burn? Was it a wake up one moment and think, no, it's worth me now making this change? Or was it a slow kind of progression that you found?
It wasn't easy, and it felt like a lot of people I respected and trusted thought it was a strange move. And in many ways, it was the beginning of, I think of myself now as a recovering people pleaser. And in some ways, this was the ultimate breakout from people pleasing, because lots of people thought it wasn't a good thing to do. And that was very unusual for me to be like, I'm going to do something that feels like it's not what everyone's expecting me to do. The thing that really triggered it, I write about this a little bit in the book, but I worked with a coach who had a rather interesting idea for how you can find your purpose in life. And it was involved 3 questions. And the questions are, what are you good at, first of all? So for me, I was writing these down. I'm quite good at organizing things. I've got a logical, structured background. I can run big projects. The next question was, what are you passionate about? And for me, that was like, well, actually, I'm becoming really passionate about this idea of what really makes for a happy and meaningful life. I'd love to sort of dive more into that as part of what I do with my life. And then the third question was like, what makes you angry? And I realized I was carrying this like real frustration that we have a culture that's built around success is more, earn more, grow the economy more, have more. And of course, that's not only breaking our planet, which was where I was working at the time this happened on environmental issues, but it's also breaking us individually.
Yeah.
And so that this coach said, you can, by combining your answers to these 3 questions, you can come up with a sort of working hypothesis for your purpose in life. So I was like, okay, I'm going to use my talent for organizing stuff and my passion for like what really matters in life to help put right priorities in society that have gone a bit wrong, or something like that. And I wrote it down. It was very clunky. And I sort of put it in a drawer. Like, yeah, I like that purpose, but how on earth would I ever get to do that? And then I opened the Sunday Times maybe a month later and saw an article by Richard Layard, this guy whose book I'd read. And he was like, we need a movement, like really making happiness a priority in society. And I was like, I had one of those really strong feelings of like, that sounds, I don't know how I could do this, but I wrote that down and I got in contact with him, and the rest is history. And, so I felt really grateful that I'd had that process of going, this is what I want to do. And then the courage to be on the lookout for opportunities. Now, I'm also incredibly blessed. That was a huge combination of good fortune. But I think you've kind of like, until you've decided where you want to head, you're not going to see the opportunities to move.
Do you think there's a cost if we don't listen to our bodies, listen to our mind?
I do. I think before I comment on that, it's worth acknowledging that there is a risk and cost that people hold in their minds that keeps them stuck. I mean, stuck sounds a bit rude, but people who choose to stay are often thinking, I might put my livelihood at risk. I might put my family at risk. I might be, taking an unwise decision to sort of step into the unknown. And I fully understand that. And particularly in a climate of, economic challenge and uncertainty, it's quite a tough ask in some cases. And yet I think there is a cost for us not listening to those signals, partly because I found the rewards to be much greater than the risks I'd imagined. I was worried like, well, I'm taking a big salary cut. That could be risky. And actually there's something really liberating that comes with like, my priority now isn't to earn more, it's to live more in a way. And there's something about like, oh, well, I'm worried that people might think I'm silly and laugh at me and so on. And actually there's something really empowering about that, having the courage of your convictions. Yeah. And now years on, I've just written the book and people are like going, wow, you had a real vision to do that 15 years ago. And I don't feel like I was visionary, but it's felt like my work, rather than my fears coming true, the opposite happened. It's actually become a source of strength in a way. Brilliant. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, it does. And what does meaning, do you think, actually look like on a day-to-day basis for people? Is it just about feeling comfortable in one's own skin when you wake up every day?
Well, I mean, I come from a background where my mum was very Christian and our household values had a sort of spiritual essence to them. I became a sort of, I sort of have lived a secular life rather than a religious life myself, but I've still sort of thought about meaning through the lens of something bigger than just us. And whether or not you believe in anything beyond the human realm, I do think that idea of being part of something bigger, even if it's just our fellow humanity, is a really powerful ultimate source of meaning. The fact that like it's not all about us is rather liberating and it encourages us to think more in terms of pro-social behavior and how we can contribute. So for me, meaning is very often to do with being part of something bigger than just yourself. And so, of course, that can be people's religious faith. It can be the great work they do for good causes, but it could also be their connection to other things that they really care about, just their family and relationships, their environmental connection with nature, so on. So there's lots of ways to find meaning. And I really like the work of Professor Mike Steger, who says it's not about the meaning of life in a sort of Monty Python, the answer's 42 kind of way. It's more like finding meaning in life. And so actually that's quite a personal thing. It's like, what is it that brings you that sense is different from what it is for me. And actually, I really have a lot of respect and admiration for people who craft meaning into the work they do. So rather than saying, oh, I've got to leave this terrible job to do something more meaningful, I mean, there's a story of a hospital worker who said, like, instead of thinking about my work as like being a cleaner in an admin role, I think I'm helping to reduce germs and save lives in a kind of critical environment, which is helping people thrive. It's like, yeah, of course you are. It's a really meaningful job to be cleaning in a hospital. That's incredibly meaningful. And so almost anything you do, you can craft meaning into it by thinking, well, I can be a source of optimism in a team that's otherwise got a difficult culture. I can bring a sense of like camaraderie or hope or whatever it is, even in tough times or cultures we don't want to be part of. So I think we all have an opportunity to craft meaning into whatever we're doing.
And interesting, I think there's a section in your book about reframing situations as well. And I suppose that sort of plays into that a little bit, doesn't it? It's like whatever your circumstances are, try to reframe things to look at the positive in what you're doing.
I really love you've made that connection. And I think in many ways it's the ultimate life skill I would love every child to be taught in school. It's the central principle behind Stoic philosophy and also modern cognitive therapy in a way, which is, in short, we can't change the situation around us very often, but we can, to some extent, choose our response to it. And actually, there's a really important insight from CBT, which is it's often our kind of the narrative or stories we hold about things that affect both how we feel and what we do more than we realize. So we say things like, she made me so angry. And what we actually mean is like, my interpretation of this situation and her behavior is leaving me feeling angry. And that may be entirely the most appropriate response in this situation, or maybe I've got a choice to not interpret it that way and actually choose a different response. And Viktor Frankl famously wrote in his wonderful book, Man's Search for Meaning, everything can be taken from a man, or indeed a woman, but one thing, the last of human freedoms, the ability to choose one's own response in any given circumstance. And I think there's just something incredibly powerful about, like, in a world of chaos and uncertainty, the one thing we have is like the choice over how we frame it and how we respond.
It's hard though, isn't it, sometimes? I think.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
It's such a simple kind of statement, and yet actually it's really hard sometimes to, because my brain works, 10 to the dozen sometimes.
Yeah.
And you try to quieten it, or you try to, I've been reasonably good at mindfulness over the years as well. But, it's nevertheless, with all the tools and the techniques I feel I've learned, sometimes to be able to do that is still a huge ask, I think.
You're completely right. And I talk in the book about this idea of trying to be a realistic optimist, because we know that we have a natural negativity bias. We're in a media climate that's kind of permanently wired towards the negative. And on top of that, the social media climate amplifies all of that. And so we often get a much harsher view of the world than is the reality. So that's why practices like looking for what's good and cultivating gratitude and so on are really helpful. And I was a skeptic on this, and for years now I've been writing down good things at the end of each day, and it's genuinely changed how I feel about my life and helped me sleep better and helped me bring more enthusiasm to my relationships and my work. And yet, there's a danger of toxic positivity. As you say, our brains get ahead of us, and all kinds of really genuinely worrying things going on in the world around us. And so claiming everything's fine when it's not is not a wise response. And so I like realistic optimism, because it's like, accept things as they are and then choose what you do from here. And so a lovely technique I share in the book to do with that is something called the power of and, from my friend Dr. Maria Siwa, who says we can accept and hold space for the difficult, messy reality of life, and we can also notice something positive or constructive around it. So I can say, genuinely, I'm really worried about my mum right now. She's in a lot of pain. And I'm really grateful she's got support in the community, and my sister lives nearby.
Yeah.
I'm really angry about what's going on with polarization in our society. And I'm really grateful there's so many people like trying to put things right and working constructively and volunteering. So in any dark situation, there's always an and. And I think the more we bring that sense of like, it's not either or, like the life can be bad and good. These are both true at the same time. And actually that gives us a sort of a realism and a hope.
In your book, I think when you were looking for that clarity in terms of your next step, you referenced, I think when you were backpacking in India, another book that you might have been reading, and there was like a long list of different things that you had to reprioritize. And
yeah, it was quite a humbling experience. Maybe we could even, maybe your listeners can visualize this now, but as you say, it was a list of things that you might consider to be a priority in life. And it was a very varied list, from health and current income to future income and feeling safe where you live, your friends, your family, your contribution to society, your spirituality. And I've missed lots out, like your professional influence and prestige, and lots and lots. And the challenge was, these are 18 and you've got to rank them in order, no ties. So you'd end up with 6 that were basically your non-negotiable, most important, 6 at the bottom that would be perhaps ones you'd let go of, and 6 in the middle that you were sort of keen on but could live without. So I spent quite a long time creating this list, and it was quite a lot of debate about, oh goodness, do I value that more than that? But I felt really proud of what I came out with, and the list was something like, I think it was family, contribution to society, friends, health, and then like professional impact or something like that. And I was like, yeah, that's a solid list. And I'm sure most of us could come up with something similar. And then the real kicker was, it said, now imagine you're a private detective that's been following your life for the last 2 years, and they've been watching everything you do and what you spend your time on. What would they conclude are your top priorities? And I was like, oh no. And basically, at that time, anyone watching my life would have thought it was, professional influence, salary, whatever, recognition, And things like family, health, friends were nowhere near the top. And that was a real wake up. It's like, okay, here's how I want to live my life and here's how I'm actually living. And they're just not really very well aligned at all. And it was, again, another of these wake up calls along the way.
No, it's interesting. I found that interesting. I think the other thing that I think is important that I hadn't really thought about until I read it was that kind of inner purpose that we're constantly looking for. It also lives in how we show up for other people as well, isn't it? It's like we're not quite interested. Can you just talk me through how other people and relationships are, and the quality of those relationships that we have really complain to who we are, how we move forward, our happiness, our confidence in ourselves?
Yeah, thank you. There's a lot there. So first of all, I think it's an opportunity to say that the most important message of this book and the work that I've had the privilege to do for 15 years is that sort of self-care matters, but it's not enough. What we need, I mean, we're in a culture where if you look at most self-help books, they're rather selfish. They're rather about just me. And alongside that, I've had the privilege to meet and work with incredible people doing a huge amount to help others, very altruistic, very pro-social, actually in many cases not very good at looking after themselves. So we've got this kind of like dichotomy of people who are rather too focused on themselves, people who are rather too focused on others. My message is these things have to go hand in hand, and in fact they go beautifully together. So when we care for ourselves, they say you can't pour from an empty cup. So when you care for yourself, you're much better placed to be a good parent, a good colleague, and a good community member. And as the research shows even more strongly, kindness is an amazing source of happiness. When we are there to give back to others, where we care, we connect, we get involved, we feel so much more fulfilled. Like life is just much richer. So that's the central point, which is like we need self-care and other care to go hand in hand. But specifically on relationships, when you look at the research on what most contributes to our happiness overall, it's rather surprising, I think. So famously, there's a study at Harvard run by Professor Robert Waldinger, and it's the longest running study ever of human lives across multiple cohorts and decades. And it's measured all kinds of things from physical health measures to survey data. And when they've controlled for other factors, the factor that most predicts a long, healthy life is what they call satisfaction with relationships, the quality, if you like, of our relationships. So more so than our physical health attributes and what we've done as a career or what we've earned, or it's actually how connected we are. So relationships are the foundation of our happiness, both individually and of course collectively as well. So that then brings up lots of these points you were hinting at there, which is like, well, to live a fulfilling life, that's a huge opportunity. So I write in the book about a whole series of relational things that I think we could put much more focus on. Number one, listening. I mean, there's a real set of skills around listening to each other that I think I never learnt. And many of us, I think a lot of the problems in our modern society about polarization and sort of not being able to disagree agreeably come from just our inability to listen to other people's perspectives. And I had another wake up with this when I finally learned how to sort of do what we call reflective listening with my partner, Kate, initially, and then with others, where you just play back what the other person has shared and check you've understood them. And this works, of course, in all of our relationships, and it's actually a skill that conflict and resolution negotiators use in really heated situations. But just giving that perhaps the greatest gift you can give another human being, which is to help them feel heard. And then I go on to talk about forgiveness and vulnerability and dealing with conflict and, of course, kindness and trust and so on. But hopefully that's given you a hint as to this huge opportunity with our human relationships, really.
And I guess if you are going through change, that communication with your other half, if you're with somebody, is absolutely vital, I suppose, to help give you the confidence to change, and that actually listening to what somebody else is saying and maybe how they're struggling to move forward. I can see how that can really play a huge part in opening up the dialogue about, hey, I'm not feeling great at the moment. I'm not quite sure where to go.
Yeah, thank you for saying that. I mean, that's a really important point about creating space for the loved ones around us to allow them to share how they're feeling and to be the sort of person that people feel able to open up to without judgment. And, whether that's then that we can help them seek support if they need it. One of the key things, I think, both in nurturing relationships and also avoiding conflict, is to not jump straight to solutions. So again, with the engineering brain in me, I was terrible at this. So I remember vividly a story I write about in the book. My daughter comes home one day having had a really tough time at college, and she's really angry, and I start sort of trying to comfort her, saying, "Don't worry, darling, it'll all be fine. It's okay." And she basically just looks at me and says, "Dad, why can't you just let me be angry?" And I missed an opportunity because I could have sort of said to her, "Gosh, it sounds like you're having a really difficult day. That's completely understandable given what you're going through." And just not go into solutions mode. People don't want to be fixed. They want to be heard. And so I think I've been getting that wrong for many years. And I think just holding space for people's difficult emotions and being able to just help them process them and actually become aware of them yourself is such a gift. And then beyond that, there's a lot of stuff that we've learned over the years around particularly dealing with conflict in relationships. There's a technique called nonviolent communication, which I think is not necessarily the most appealingly titled technique, but basically is a really wise way of being able to describe your own needs and your own experiences, and indeed listen to the other person's, without getting into this thing that we often all do, which is to describe other people's intentions and other people's feelings. We say things like, "You don't care," or like, "You did that on purpose," but we don't know that. That's in their brain. All we ever know is how we feel and our intentions. And there's a metaphor I love of staying on your side of the net, where the net is like, the things you have control over, how you feel and what you've done and what you've seen. But you don't know. I don't know as I'm speaking how my words are landing with you.
Yeah.
And you don't know what my intention is in saying them. And
Yeah.
so the more we stay our side of the net and I describe, when you said that, I felt this and this is what I saw, rather than saying, "You don't care, you did this." Most conflict comes from us stepping over to the other side of the net, which is the other person's territory and their own experience. And I think, again, so much of our day-to-day frustrations and our political problems could be helped by us being a bit more able to manage and own our own emotions and then hold space for other people's.
And I hope you don't mind me sort of bringing this up. I know you dedicated your book to your dad, who I'm sorry that you lost earlier this year.
Yeah.
What did that kind of loss bring to you at the point of writing the book in terms of looking for a happier life, finding purpose, finding meaning, and so many other topics? What did that bring to you?
Well, thank you for your kind words. So Dad died actually after I'd pretty much finished writing the book. In fact, it was a very bizarre week because I just sort of finalized the manuscript when it happened. So he is dedicated, the dedication in the book, but I'd written the book having not lost a parent ever and experienced that. So of course, a really significant experience of grief and loss and sadness. The thing I think I'd most feel motivated to share in connection with that was a theme I write about in the book, which I called "Ordinary Moments Are Precious." And it's an idea I've borrowed from Sam Harris, but it's this idea. Well, let me retell it as Sam would, and then I'll come back to Dad in a moment. So as you listen to this, wherever you are, think of something you love to do or you really value in your life. And here's a painful fact about it that's almost certainly true. There will be a last time you get to do that thing. So there will be a last time I get to play my guitar. There'll be a last time I get to cycle my bike up a beautiful mountain. There's already been a last time I get to walk my children to school. And almost always you don't know it's that last time until after it's happened. And so I found that a really powerful concept, and it helped me. Well, I mean, the first memory I have of it is driving on a stressful day with lots of traffic with the family in the car and just being really like, I want to go home. This traffic's awful, and just like not being in a good mental place. And then remembering this idea of like, there will be a last time. And like, for all I know, this might be the last time I ever get to drive my family along a country road with their city playlist on and like us all together.
Yeah.
And this is precious. And like in that moment, I went from angry and stressed to being like, oh, wow, these are people I love. And this is like, this is the unique one life we have right now, right here. And so in January this year, I just dropped my daughter back at university and I called home and Dad answered the phone and we started chatting, and I hadn't spoken to him for a while. And after a few minutes, I found my brain in the background doing something it often does, which is like, come on, Mark, you're busy. You've got lots to do. You can chat to Dad later. And somehow, and I'm so grateful for this, I remember this idea of there will be a last time. And I thought, no, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to stay really present for this conversation. And Dad and I talked. Well, we actually had our longest phone call ever. Lasted like 40 minutes, and like all kinds of funny stories and random updates and things. And at the end I said, oh, I love you, Dad. And he said, oh, nice to chat. And that was the last conversation I ever had with him. And obviously devastated that, a few days later he had a major stroke and I lost him. But I'm so grateful for that insight about like ordinary moments are precious. And I don't have those regrets. So if only I'd have a certain conversation with Dad. I was in that conversation being, I'm going to be present. You never know. This could be the last time. And I told him I loved him. And, that's something I'm so grateful for. And I just want to bring that kind of spirit into so much of how I live the rest of my life, really.
Yeah. It's interesting. My dad had a stroke back in 2021.
I'm sorry to hear that.
And what was interesting about it is that me and my wife had a difficult patch back in 2019. And it sort of ended up with me moving out for about 9 months. And I went and moved in with Dad, which obviously it was difficult. And I'm pleased to say that me and Vic sorted it all out and we're stronger now than we've ever been. So it all worked out in the end. But I had these kind of 9 months with my dad and we'd have a pint, he'd chat and joke about stuff. About 6 months after that, he had his stroke and it knocked him for 6. And it was about, was it a year later maybe, he then passed, and he really knocked him for 6 in many, many ways. And I always looked then at that period I had with Dad as such a special time. Not that I knew that at the time, because I was, trying to work things out with my wife. But when I look back now, I see that as such a fond period of time, because I just never knew we were going to have that. And we spoke about, as you said, lots of things as well. Well, thank you for sharing that.
Well, likewise, thank you for sharing that. That sounds difficult. And it's a nice example of sometimes things that feel like they're going wrong. And obviously relationship challenges can be really hard, can bring other aspects and other changes that with hindsight, we can look back and say, I'm kind of glad that opportunity came up as well.
It's funny, and I can't recall the book that I read, but there was a story in there, and the long short of it is, good thing, bad thing, who knows? When these things happen, you don't know whether it's a good or a bad thing. And he recalls a story in there about a certain thing happening, and the person says, "Oh, that's really bad, isn't it?" And the thing was a farmer said, "Oh, good thing, bad thing, who knows?" And then something else happened after that, and his neighbour said something like, "Oh, that's a really good thing." He said, "Good thing, bad thing, who knows?" The fact is, you never really know when these things happen whether they are going to be a good thing or a bad thing. It really does depend at the point that they judge it on. That, when something isn't going so well, it might end up being one of the best things that ever happens. You don't know, do you? But
yeah, nicely put. I know that story. I like it as well.
So just moving to a close, last thing on the book, what have you learned about yourself with the book, the journey of the book? Personally, what have you learned?
Do you know, I've not been asked that question since I've written it. Gosh, it's an interesting blend of humility and sort of leaning into things that feel uncomfortable. So I think I've been humbled to realize that this is really hard to do, to write a book. And I have enormous respect for people who've done this many times, and really humbled actually by the response from people in the Action for Happiness community who've really got behind this. And I think I've learned that I can and have an opportunity to be more bold in how I put myself forward. And that when I do that, it doesn't lead to... My worry was people thinking like, who are you to write a book? Why are you using this non-profit you've built to self-promote? And so I was carrying all this baggage about like I'm asking people to buy a book and people haven't got much money right now. And I was bringing all this. And actually, the team sat me down and said, look, Mark, if your book is a success, then our mission with the charity is more likely to be a success. You owe it to us to make this work. I was really grateful for that nudge. And I think I've learned that sometimes stepping into that sort of putting yourself forward for the greater good can actually be liberating, and people don't shoot you down and attack you. People respond really warmly to it. So that's been a helpful lesson. I think I've also learned a practical lesson around a habit of choosing the most important thing for each day. And so something I've been doing daily now is at the beginning of each day, just think what's the most important thing? If I had to hold on to just one thing today, what would it be? And sometimes that is, I just need to wrap up this chapter. But other times it's I actually need to get home early to be with my daughter who's had a tough week. And actually having a bit of clarity around when the proverbial hits the fan, what's the one thing I need to hold on to today that matters most? I found that a really helpful habit. And in many cases, that meant I need to make space to write my book or whatever your equivalent might be of the thing that is important first thing in the morning before the noise of the world comes up. So actually having a habit of like, before I open my inbox, before I respond to other people's requests, I'm just going to spend some time. And again, it builds on something I talk a lot about in the book about habits, which is the best way to build habits is to break them down to be as small and repeatable as possible. So on a busy day, it wasn't that I didn't do any writing. It was that I only did like 2 minutes. Like I opened it up, thought about it a bit, wrote down a sentence, and then that was it for the day. But I'd kept the habit going. And actually, I think a lot about happiness engineering is like taking the things that we know help us and actually wiring them into our day-to-day experience and making them last. Keep it simple, like enjoy the upside of the thing that you've achieved. And, there's various other techniques we could talk about, but I think I have had to build daily skills around using time wisely. And I think you realize that time is this precious thing that we have. And when we say, I don't have time for that, what we really mean is I'm choosing something else over it. And I think the more we're aware of I don't have time really means I've made something more important. It's the question of like, well, what is the thing I've made most important right now?
15 years of work talking to scientists, psychologists. Is there one thing you found to be true about living a meaningful life that most people, you think, still get wrong?
Yeah, I think it's to do with the power of action. And there's a phrase I love, which is, we don't think our way into new ways of living. We live our way into new ways of thinking. So I think especially when it comes to thinking about meaningful life, we sort of think like, I've got to do some big grand change. And actually there's an enormous amount of sort of agency and confidence and opportunity that comes when we just take a first step and try something. So the power of starting with action and noticing how you then feel and then what thoughts that triggers, rather than waiting for motivation, I think is the key. Don't wait for motivation, start by trying and the rest follows.
Brilliant. And just a closing thought, anything that you'd say to those that are maybe finding it difficult to move forward? Maybe they're a bit stuck. They're not quite sure where to head. What would you say to them?
Well, first of all, it's understandable to feel stuck and that's okay. And just accepting how you feel is a really good starting point. There's a lot of challenge in our world right now, and all of us are dealing with stuff that others can't see. So it's very common and you are not alone. Secondly, there's an enormous power in talking to people. That might be a loved one or a trusted friend. Actually, I have found over the years talking to a coach or a therapist or a psychologist can be enormously helpful and to me is a sign of strength, not of weakness. And then in terms of getting unstuck, there's a huge literature around using our strengths. And I think one of the best things we can do is to just be more aware of like, what are the things that really bring out the joy in us, the best in us, and how do I weave more of those into my daily life? So rather than trying to get unstuck in ways that we feel we should, like I must go to the gym and I punish myself in the gym, it's like, well, what's the form of exercise that I love? And rather than like, oh, I need to find some really meaningful thing to do, it's like, well, I think I joyfully got involved with unintentionally recently was just on a Friday night, my daughter and I we're part of a team of local volunteers. We pick up some food from the local shops that have got it spare at the end of the week and we take it to the food bank. And it doesn't take very long, but we meet these lovely people in the community. It helps people who are struggling right now. And it's just like, okay, I hadn't planned that to become part of my life. And it just sort of arose and plays to a strength of, my daughter and I wanted to do something on a Friday night. And, so I think, yeah, accept how you are, talk to others, and then go with your strengths and the things that like light you up, if you like.
Don't be too hard on yourself, really, isn't it? It's so last question. How is that cycle to the moon going?
Yeah. So my life mission is to cycle to the moon before I die, and that's 384,400 kilometers, which is a ridiculously long way. I really believe in sort of having goals and aims in life, and these are kind of ridiculous big life goals that's completely unachievable. I suspect I won't cycle to the moon before I die, and I'm fine with that. But what it means is on rainy days when the weather's bad, I'm just much more likely to actually still get out on my bike, which I love and is a great source of happiness as well as fitness for me. So I'm currently only 42% of the way to the moon. I think if I continue at sort of on current pace and I tail off as I inevitably will as I get older, I'm due to arrive at the moon around age 82, to which my wife says, oh no, he's still going to be wearing that terrible Lycra in his 80s. What a nightmare. But it keeps me motivated, and it's just, a sort of a conversation starter and a motivator on the less sunny days.
Brilliant. Mark, I really have enjoyed this. Thank you so much for finding the time with everything else that you're doing. It's been an absolute joy, and, just continued good luck with the book, and obviously everything you're doing for Action for Happiness and all the good that you're doing. And I'll include some links, obviously, in the show notes and all that kind of stuff to your site and Action for Happiness and all of those bits and bobs. So thank you so much.
Well, thank you. I've loved the conversation. Great questions, lots of food for thought, and would encourage anyone listening to check out Action for Happiness and get involved in this community. And I guess as a reminder of the key message, it's about looking after ourselves and looking out for others. And then when we do those two things together, life is just richer and happier and more meaningful. And we genuinely can make a difference, not just to ourselves, but in the world around us as well.
Mark, thank you so much for your time and for that conversation. So here are some reflections that stood out for me. Happier beats happy. It's a direction of travel, not a destination. We've heard that so many times before. Wherever you are right now, whatever you're feeling, there's always something small that you can do to head in a better direction. That alone takes the pressure off. If only I could do more of that myself. Purpose isn't always one big grand change. Mark talked about crafting meaning into whatever you're already doing, and how the first step usually matters more than the perfect plan. We don't think our way into new ways of living, we live our way into new ways of thinking. If you're feeling stuck, you don't wait for motivation, Mark said. You start by trying, and the rest should follow. He also said feeling lost in midlife is more common than we admit, and we're not alone in it. Accepting how you feel is a genuinely good place to begin. Use your strengths. Notice the things that bring out the best in you and find ways to weave more of them into your days. That's often where meaning quietly lives. If you're in that in-between phase yourself, Mark's book, Make Life Happier, is well worth a read. And there are links to his work and Action for Happiness in the show notes. And if this is your first time listening, welcome. Life's second act is full of honest, generous conversations with people navigating all sorts of midlife transitions, from career pivots to personal reinventions. There's plenty more where this came from. Wherever you're listening, thank you for spending this time with us. So until next time, take care and goodbye.